welcome back. We are at the Big Connect presented by Comcast Business, and I'm very excited to bring in our next panel. And what we're going to be talking about this afternoon, advancements within the bioscience industry. And this is brought to you by the Chamber's Healthcare and Life Sciences Council, and also our sponsor, We Work for Health. We appreciate them supporting this panel. We have a great lineup with us today. Graham Goodrich, the Senior Vice President for Brand Marketing at Biohaven Pharmaceuticals. David Light, CEO at Valshar. Dawn Hocevar, President and CEO of BioCT. And John Grosso, Vice President of Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls at RVENUS. So let me welcome in all four of our panelists, and thank you again for being a part of this program today. As you've seen, we've been running with a lot of different programming, and we wanted to make sure that we spent some time talking about the bioscience industry because it's such an important part of New Haven and the growth of our region overall. So I'll start by introducing each of our panelists and ask them to just say a few words about their positions and the organizations they're with and what they do. And Dawn, I'll start with you, Dawn Hocevar with BioCT. Dawn?
Hi, thank you very much, Garrett. I appreciate the introduction. Excuse me, for those of you who don't know BioCT, we are the voice of the bioscience industry in the state of Connecticut. And our goal and mission is to build collaboration between government, industry, academia, and help companies here grow and be very successful. So we work with 1 to 2 companies in incubator spaces, all the way to the pharma companies such as Pfizer and Boehringer Ingelheim. And I'm very excited to be here today because there's a lot going on in Connecticut in this industry, and I'm looking forward to sharing. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Appreciate it. We always enjoy partnering with BioCT because of the strong connection here in New Haven. Graham Goodrich. Graham is with Biohaven, and Graham, every time we turn around, Biohaven is in the news. It's been a big year, I know, for the company, and we're so excited about the success that you guys have had.
Oh, thanks. It's been humbling, but I appreciate the opportunity to be part of Big Connect, and certainly this panel, and to get to know everyone, at least virtually. But for those of you who don't know Biohaven, Biohaven is a biopharmaceutical company that's focused on the development and commercialization of medicines that aim to really radically improve the lives of people living with serious neurological and neuropsychiatric disease. And we started with one person and one compound in 2014 and have grown quite a bit since then. But it's a pleasure to be on the panel.
Thanks, Graham. Let me turn to John. And John, Ourvenice is another company that has been exploding over the last several years and is part of the surge of bioscience companies in New Haven. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Right, thank you. It's a pleasure to join the panel and the conference. Ourvenice is a company which is pioneering the use of protein degradation to treat disease. Professor at Yale, Craig Crews, is sort of the father of protein degradation using small molecules. These small molecules, we call them PROTACs. We're currently running 2 clinical trials with these molecules, one to treat prostate cancer, or looking to treat prostate cancer, one looking to treat breast cancer. These are ongoing trials. It's a very exciting field. It's a technology that can be deployed across many different disease areas. And Ourvenice, the company itself, I joined the company in 2017. We had 40 employees, and I understand as of today, we are now at 180, which I guess is quadrupled. And we occupy facilities in Science Park, which is basically Northside campus in the Yale area. So thanks again for the invite, and looking forward to a good discussion.
Thanks, John. David Light, CEO of Valshar. And David, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your company and what you do, a little bit different than some of the other topics we've been talking about so far.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me on today. Great to be a part of this discussion. And Valshar really at its core has the mission of independently checking the chemistry of medication before it gets to patients. And obviously hear a lot about exciting new therapies, but 90% of what an American takes day to day is a generic drug that are almost all made in India and China. And it's been a growing visibility to the recalls, contamination problems, all sorts of issues with overseas manufacturing before COVID, and certainly with COVID, I think has only shined that much brighter of a light on the vulnerability of our supply chain, our reliance on China, and a variety of these hot button topics. And really what we do is we just test medications, certify them, and then pass them on to the patients, assuming they pass. We reject over 10% of the batches we analyze currently, and we were the ones responsible for all the Zantac recalls that made international news. We testified before the US Senate this year, and continue to try and bring this value to patients. We have an online pharmacy that's licensed all over the United States, so we ship medications all over the country that come with our certification. And we're working more and more with the broader healthcare industry. We've had some announcements this year about working with wholesalers, manufacturers, clinics, health systems, hospitals, and everybody in between to try and get this value to as many patients as possible.
Well, thanks, David. And part of the reason why we wanted to do this panel was just to let people know, I know the people are watching today, cross-section of industries, but really put a spotlight on what's going on in bioscience, why it's such an important part of the growth trajectory of the Greater New Haven region. Dawn, I'll start with you, but really a question for everyone on the panel. Why are we having so much success in bioscience in New Haven in this region? And what's your outlook for what can happen here in Connecticut?
Great question. Why we're having success? Because we have brilliant scientists here that are bringing products to commercialization. A lot of these companies have been spun out of Yale. They have their OCR tech transfer office. And I know that other universities in the state are also gearing up to do more commercialization. And part of the reason for the success is there is investment coming in. And so we have some solid investment arms in the state, such as Canaan Partners down in the Stamford area, Connecticut Innovations, which is the state funding source that the state had given $200 million a few years ago. And they have done a great job of investing in companies and seeing success. And then also we're seeing a need right now, desperate need for lab space because of all of this growth that's going on. So we currently have incubator space at TIP, which is up in the Yukon area in Farmington. We have the Commons incubator in Groton, and we will have 2 incubators coming into the New Haven area. I'm very excited to say that. One hopefully will be opening doors by midsummer next year. And then everybody has heard of Carter Winstanley's 101 College project. 5 stories, 500,000 square feet. It will have a 100,000 square foot incubator in there. So there is space coming. And there's a lot of development happening in the Branford area. Companies that are coming out of the TIP incubator are moving into Branford, finding space there. And so I do know that there are a lot of companies that want to be close to Yale. So it's a matter of getting these upcoming labs available to keep that momentum going.
And I'll throw it open to the rest of the panel. Why New Haven? Why is it working well for your business?
Yeah, so at least from a recruiting perspective, I think there are great advantages to be in the New Haven area, especially in pharmaceuticals. So if you think back in time, a real hub and center for pharmaceutical research and manufacturing was, for example, the New Jersey and the New York area. And so in many cases, folks have family members perhaps still employed down there, and kind of see New Haven as a great place to work in science without having to go all the way up to Boston. And so, we're able to recruit from the New York to New Jersey and actually the Pennsylvania area. And again, it's that, 60 or 70 shorter mile drive, which kind of keeps New Haven really in the mix. And so it's a wonderful location from a recruiting perspective. I mean, a lot cheaper to, live and work in New Haven, Connecticut area than, let's say, in Boston as an example. So it's a great inducement. It's certainly a very pleasant and vibrant place to work. And I think it draws a lot of highly qualified scientific talent to the area.
And John, I'll just follow on that too, especially since you guys have been hiring so much. Are we at the point too where someone can feel comfortable if they leave a job at one bioscience company that there's another opportunity for them? They may not have to leave New Haven, Branford, this region? Absolutely.
And I think a large majority of our employees are folks who've worked at other pharmaceutical companies within like a 25-mile radius of New Haven and just moved over to RVENUS for, one or more reasons. It really works well.
I mean, I'm an example of one of those individuals. I worked at Boehringer Ingelheim for 11 years and through connections came to Biohaven. And, Dawn and John both hit it. Every major city wants to have a cluster economy, right? You want to have a hub because, it just is a magnet for investment and jobs. And I think when you look at the characteristics of New Haven, while every city wants to have it, not every city can because they don't have the right ingredients. And strong academic institutions, which brings intellectual capital, serious depth of expertise and research, and access to equity, private equity in particular. That's kind of a magical formula for hub success. And you see that, present in New Haven. And in particular, when you look at neurology, oncology, and rare disease, the analogy I always use is Leonardo da Vinci came up with this perpetual motion machine. And, the idea is once it gets going, it just keeps going and it feeds itself. And I think that's one good analogy for a cluster economy, because when you have success in oncology, when you have success in rare disease, the talent expands and grows and draws more investment and more talent. And I think we're at that tipping point with New Haven now, where we've got a really strong foundation and people just want to replicate the success.
And Graham, I've noticed that Biohaven has really leaned into New Haven. You guys put a stake down right downtown New Haven, and so I mean, even in the name, it's part of the identity of the company. At least it appears to the outside.
Yeah, I mean, Vlad Korich, our CEO, is particularly passionate on this topic. I think 40% of the biotechs have some connection with Yale and the Office of Cooperative Research. That's how Biohaven started. And when you think about, where you came from and what got you to where you are, you want to continue to feed that. And, whether it's using, lawyers, supply companies, renovating a dilapidated building on Church Street, which is what Biohaven did. All of that goes back to, the community. And, that's an important part of the ethos of Biohaven, but I really think it's not unique to Biohaven. Companies that, have had success in the area, want to continue to see their community thrive.
David, tell us a bit about your story about why here in New Haven for you guys.
Sure. So it kind of echoes everything that was said already, where Yale has been obviously a great center point for us. I'm a Yale alumni. A lot of the original Valshar founders are friends and colleagues from Yale, and we kind of came together to create this company. And at Yale Science Park, we fight RVENUS all the time for space, and they often win. But it's a very vibrant place, and I think underscores how much activity and growth there is. The fact that there is no additional space, and as soon as a room is open, there's always activity for trying to grab that. But beyond just Yale, which I think is a great resource itself and has a lot of very specific talent, especially for these very specialized pharmaceutical companies and all sorts of bioscience avenues. You also have quite an ecosystem of colleges of varying degrees and programs, most of which have programs in the sciences, and that critical mass of just a young workforce potential that we see a lot. I mean, we have people from all different universities coming into Valshar, and we have a lot of positions where we just need to turn the crank on a lot of scientific analytical work. So that opportunity to bring in new talent, freshly out of college or second or third job kind of getting into their career, you have a lot of that. I think an excess capacity of that even in New Haven, and including from Yale. You have a lot of new graduates from Yale, University of New Haven, Southern Connecticut, obviously Quinnipiac. There's a variety of places where people are excited to make an impact in the bioscience world. And I think the more we grow, the more we give avenues for that. And being a Yale alumni myself, I was always a little disappointed with the level of entrepreneurialism support that Yale gave. So I think the fact that the city is really stepping in to bolster that is great, A, and B, there's a lot of interest in that. I know there's a lot of university students, both undergrad and graduate, that are coming out that want to make an impact, want to be in startups, want to be in impactful companies. And I think we have not exhausted that capacity, even just out of New Haven, for being able to take advantage of that.
It's inspiring to hear the excitement that you all have for New Haven region. I know myself, but I'll hear from you guys. What are some of the things that are either missing right now or that we could do more of to get New Haven, the region, to that next step? I know Dawn touched upon lab space. I know that's been an issue. And with any industry, there's some opportunities out there too that we could take advantage of as a state. What comes to mind for you folks? And I'll start, maybe Dawn, if you want to start on this. I know you're advocating on these issues all the time.
Really, the lab space is the big issue. We have demand. There are people who want to come here, want to be here, and as was mentioned, we're sticking them everywhere that we can. So I'm relieved to know that there is space coming, and with that, because of the growth that's happening, we're seeing a lot more interest by outside brokers, the CBREs, Cushman Wakefields, developers who want to get a piece of this. And so they're all trying to figure out how they can, put a stake in the ground, hopefully a building in the ground, and improve that. I think another piece is, as we continue to build our ecosystem, that we really have a campaign to brand Connecticut and brand New Haven. What is going on here? Why should people look at this? We are in a phenomenal 95 corridor in a super cluster. And right now, BioCT is working closely with MassBio to figure out how to build partnerships with them so that we can draw on some of the value that they've worked 20 plus years to bring to their members and have that brought to our members. But even more so, we really want to grow this region. And New Haven is situated perfectly along that 95 corridor. So, investors can, from Boston to Maryland, and take time out to be here as well.
David, maybe I'll turn to you. Are there some gaps that you see out there that we could address?
Yeah, no, I think Don covered it certainly very well. And the most immediate is space. And, we went through that iteration even this year. Like, we know we had to grow. And that's first and foremost. If there's no space to grow here, then we have to move out. And beyond that, I totally agree with the branding concept. There's so much of that foundation there, but like actually taking some, branding ownership of New Haven and even Connecticut being a bioscience hub would, I think, be very beneficial, because Boston's already done that. Everybody already thinks Boston. New York is very up and coming in, not just up and coming, they're like number 2 to San Francisco now in terms of all sorts of startup, but including in the biotech industry. So I think if you just think about the Northeast holistically, you automatically think Boston and New York. And even just inserting ourselves into that conversation, I think is really important, and you have to be proactive about it. And I know that Boston, New York are very proactive about it. And obviously they have a different level of resources for all that, but I think, we don't have to take over the entire Northeast life science market to make an impact. And I think just getting in that mindset and, getting together with, some of the key legislators, the mayor, like there's, we have a close relationship with Rosa DeLauro who loves the whole bioscience areas. Maybe there's some events we could do. And I think it would be pretty impactful. And then, I think the branding side could be powerful because the foundation is already there.
That's great to hear. And John and Graham, I'll leave the same question open to you, and I'll just say, last night I was on a Zoom meeting with the mayor and several residents around the airport. So the airport is still an issue that we're pushing, because we really feel, transportation, if we can get people in and out of New Haven, I imagine that has a big impact for bioscience companies as well. John, you're on the mute right there.
I was just going to mention the airport. I guess there's maybe one scheduled commercial flight in and out, or 2 perhaps. My own personal experience trying to fly out of New Haven for a change of planes, I think in Philadelphia. I was on like the 7 o'clock flight. Unfortunately, it was canceled. The airline put me on a bus to send me to Bradley. So clearly, that's a huge area of potential. I mean, not only in terms of just getting people in and out of New Haven, but there's always this desire to sort of reduce the density out of the major airports. So if somebody's going into, someplace like Stamford or Westport, they would have to fly like into Newark and drive up from there, where if you could develop the airport in New Haven as sort of like a regional airport, then it's much more convenient. It's much less expensive for parking and that sort of thing. And it would just bring a lot more activity, easy activity, rather than, standing in traffic on 95 or waiting for a train. So that's one of the gaps. And surely the other is, there's pros and cons, having 95 is a huge pro in terms of, let's say, office parks adjacent to the city or actually within the city. I know I'm from the New Jersey area, and all up and down New Jersey Turnpike, developers go in and they just, on speculation, put up 500,000 square feet of office/lab space, and you'll see a big sign out there, for lease, 100,000 square foot office and light research. And so having that artery there is really the incentive and the place for developers to go in and build those kind of facilities, which would relieve the density issues that we have, for example, in Science Park with Valshar.
And Graham, same question. I'm sure that you guys have faced some challenges as you try to get this growth right here.
Yeah, I mean, I think our elected officials, right, can play a huge role in the infrastructure and certainly the promotion of the industry in partnership with the private community. And I think if you see it as a treasured asset that is key to the livelihood of the states, and you look at opportunities to really extract that value, you've got to look at New Haven. You've got to look at the infrastructure as a treasured asset that you want to continue to invest in. And I think, we've seen that in other states, and I think, we have that potential. I know there's been some really good progress, but I think, that transportation, that infrastructure piece is important, but then also the design of being virtual, right? And being able to, have kind of leading virtual capabilities. I'm not as close to it on the research side, because I know that can be a bit more challenging. But being enabling that and embracing that, and making sure that our facilities are equipped to do that really well is going to be a key tenet for the future.
Thanks. Now I want to turn a little bit about some of the neat things that are happening in each of your companies. And I know Dawn can talk about several companies that we have around here. We've seen a lot in just the last several months about how companies in New Haven, in the region, in the state have been integral to the fight in the pandemic. And I know that's not a primary focus for any of your organizations, but it has been great to see the national attention, everything that's been going on at Yale University. Maybe just tell us a little bit about the products that you're working on, the kind of neat discoveries that are going on right here in New Haven for many diseases, many symptoms that people have, different issues that they're dealing with, and how it's going to change their lives. Graham, I'll start with you.
Sure. It's been a year. We've been, as I mentioned, Biohaven's focus is on debilitating neurological and neuropsychiatric disease, and we'll start with migraine. And migraine, as I'm sure many of you can appreciate, statistically, many people listening have migraine or have family members afflicted with migraine. But over 40 million people in the country have migraine. It disproportionately affects women. 1 in 5 women have debilitating migraine. And for the last 20 years, there has been little innovation and advancement in migraine treatment. And we were fortunate on February 28th, the FDA approved Nurtec ODT, which is the brand that we're spending a lot of time on right now. And we had an auspicious beginning because we launched on the eve of COVID. Early March is when we really started launching, and we weren't sure how it was going to go. But Nurtec ODT is particularly exciting for the migraine community, and we're excited about it because when you think about migraine treatment, that legacy of treatment, it's been fraught with difficulty. Often lots of trade-offs between relieving pain and being able to function. Relieving pain and having to stay in bed all day and experience other side effects. So there's been a need for new novel therapies in this space. And Nurtec ODT has a bit of a unique profile. It was proven to eliminate migraine pain quickly, restore people's ability to get back to function, get back to work, to the things that they're doing. And it lasts for up to 48 hours. Which is particularly important because one of the complications with migraine is rebound headache, and it can knock you out not just for a few hours or a day, but 2 or 3 days. And so that efficacy profile with a safety profile that's consistent with placebo has just been a major advancement. And I'm really proud to say that despite the headwinds of COVID, we were able to launch. We have over 30,000 people prescribing Nurtec ODT so far, and have treated over 150,000 patients since March. And so we're really bullish about the potential, and just really excited about the reaction of patients, because what we're hearing is they've been struggling 10, 20, 30 years and haven't had anything that's worked for them. And for many, Nurtec ODT is providing pretty transformative relief, which is really gratifying to see. So that's one area I'm really excited about. You mentioned COVID, and one of the trials that we are working on now is with another CGRP agent, and it's called zavegepant, and we're studying it to address pulmonary complications with COVID. And so, that's something we saw an opportunity. We saw the pathophysiology, may in fact work. So we quickly rallied and worked with Thomas Jefferson University to get that trial up and running. And then I would just say quickly, the third area that we're really excited about, there's a broader portfolio of neurological disease that we're working in, including Alzheimer's, spinal cerebellar ataxia, obsessive compulsive disease, ALS, and many of these trials will be reading out. These are late stage compounds that'll be reading out. The earliest readout is in Alzheimer's, and I think another one of those diseases that I'm sure everybody has some touchstone with in their family or friends. And there's been a very difficult area in terms of drug discovery, and we remain hopeful that in January or later in this December even, that we get top line results in that Alzheimer's trial. So when you look at all of that, it's been an amazing year, and we've been really excited with the progress that we've made.
It's exciting for humanity with what you're doing. John, I know at RVENUS, you guys treat some of the most difficult to treat disorders, things that are rare. Just tell us what goes on in the building to try to make these discoveries, to try to address these different disorders.
Right. So just maybe a little bit of the very basic biology here. Of course, we know that proteins are sort of like the little miniature factories and powerhouses in our bodies and our cells. And, when everything is working right, that's great. But occasionally, proteins go awry, they go amiss. And in many cases, when that happens, it leads to disease. And so, RVENUS has been, pioneering the use of these protein degraders. We call them PROTACs. So if you have a protein, which is misbehaving, we can fashion a small molecule which will actually induce the cell to degrade that protein and take away its effects in the genesis and continuation of disease. The cool thing about it is, one is not just limited to a particular therapeutic area. We're currently working in oncology right now for prostate cancer and breast cancer, but it has wide applicability across all sorts of diseases. One that comes to mind, of course, would be in neurology, where you have, aberrant, misfolded, dysfunctional proteins accumulating in the brain, causing all sorts of problems like Parkinson's and Huntington's and Alzheimer's. So great opportunities there. A lot of what we do at RVENUS is essentially examine the biology, develop biological tests and methods to test our compounds, right? And so in many cases, a particular type of cell that expresses a certain protein, needs to be created so we can actually check whether or not these new compounds that we're making have some activity in vitro, we call it, in the petri dish, with the cells, and then of course extend that into an appropriate animal model, and test the compounds there. So I would say right now in Science Park, we probably have maybe 60, 70+% of our folks actually developing the biological assays. Now, the kind of stuff that I do and my group does is technical operations or chemistry, manufacturing, controls. While we do have a group of steering, I call them like steering folks and leaders, most of our work is done externally. So the chemistry, if you will, is done outside of New Haven to a large extent. And the same thing applies to discovery chemistry. So we have a real core of biological expertise within the company, in Science Park. And that's where we devote most of our laboratory space to. It is challenging because, you see a disease in a human and you kind of try and figure out what is the simplest model you can develop in a cell or in a petri dish or in an animal, which is an appropriate model. So a lot of thinking and creativity goes into actually developing those models. So ultimately we can test these small molecules that we make to degrade target proteins.
And David, I know you gave a description at the beginning about some of the work that Valshar does, and everyone's been talking a lot about trust when it comes to the COVID vaccines that will come out. So that's so important anytime anyone gets any type of prescription.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's essentially how we were founded. A good friend of mine from college had a lot of problems with his own anticonvulsant medications, generic, not to say that brand is always perfect, but, you refill it every month, and every once in a while I have a month where it just, felt a lot of side effects and, relapses here and there. And talk to his doctors, and doctors tell him, listen, everything is made in India and China these days, and there isn't just a whole lot we can do about it. Kind of is what it is. And he didn't like that answer, and we kind of put our head together about how do we really solve this issue, not just add more awareness. And we talk about the year. I mean, this year obviously it's been crazy for a whole bunch of reasons, but the fact that there is more visibility than ever before on that vulnerability of the supply chain and our dependence internationally, I think is important for making progress on this. And we did see some pretty big proofs that this is important, with everything around the Zantac and the ranitidine recalls. And it was really, that started last year when we petitioned the FDA to take it off the market. It was this year, April of this year, that they finally did. At the height of COVID, we did say it a while back, but it finally went through all of its channels, and it was taken off, entirely recalled off the market due to a fundamental instability. Like the drug itself was unstable, was forming a carcinogen, both in transportation, storage, and our data pointing very strongly towards it being in the human body as well. We had a joint press conference with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro at the U.S. Capitol building at the start of this year to display some data that we had, a study that we thought we had completed with Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center on some of these concerns, and the Journal of the American Medical Association pulled the study literally hours before it was going to publish, which is very frustrating. But we're actually hoping that that'll actually come out before the end of this year. Been a lot of back and forth and thousands of hours of further analytics. So that's just one drug. There was another interesting scenario around the drug metformin. It's been one of the staple drugs for decades, specifically for diabetes. It's the number 4 most prescribed drug in the United States, about 90 million prescriptions a year. And there is a lot of concern about it internationally, especially around the potential of, again, carcinogenic contaminations, likely due to poor manufacturing practices and products. And the FDA actually did a full analysis, or at least analysis of a number of different manufacturers, published their data. Everything looked clean and fine. We did our own independent analysis of what's actually in the supply chain. I think there's a lot of nuanced issues when you look at quality of drugs. One of them is that there is no independent check, not just of the chemistry itself, but even independently sourced. The FDA often will ask for a voluntary sample from a manufacturer, and then turns out what they got was fine. When we source from our own pharmacy, from independent sourcing, and running our own tests in our own ISO accredited facility, we found lots of problems. We have 40% of the metformin that we analyzed failed. We filed an FDA citizen petition, and now there's for months been rolling recalls of this massive drug product due to these contaminations. So I think, again, underscoring the importance of doing that. And really, this all boils down to a patient, as you said, having confidence in what they're taking, whether that be a vaccine, their standard drug, brand or generic. That's certainly what we hope to do. And really this year, we've been doing that not just through our pharmacy. We've had a lot of success more and more establishing this throughout the healthcare ecosystem, with manufacturers, with distributors, health systems, clinics, where we're in multiple clinics now where they have their own pharmacy, and we wholesale to them a certified batch of medication. They're able to then give that to their own patients with our certificates. And we even published a paper this year with Yale, Columbia, NYU, and a number of really big healthcare leaders, Cleveland Clinic, about how can you use all that data. Now take the data and boil it down into just red, yellow, green quality scores that can help inform health systems making purchasing decisions or reimbursement decisions. So it's a very complicated healthcare world. Supply chain, reimbursement, health, everything is having been an outsider previously, my mind is constantly blown with how ridiculously complicated it is. But we're making our way through that to continue to make this kind of really much needed impact, not just through our own pharmacy, but in the broader healthcare system.
Well, David, just hearing you speak, I'm sure you have a lot of people who, when they see you come around, don't want to see you come around, and they don't just say something's not right, right?
Yeah, look, I think it's a careful, balancing act, and I think one thing that's been very important for us is, we're very science focused. We don't say, hey, we're not pointing fingers at a particular manufacturer, even particular companies. People ask us all the time, like, oh, should I just not buy anything that comes from China? Like, well, first of all, then you're just not going to buy anything in the pharmaceutical world. We actually had one of the top directors at a huge university health system told me that the CEO of the whole health system had told him, the director of the pharmacy, can you just stop buying from India and China? And he said, well, you can shut down the pharmacy if you'd like. And our point is that you just need to independently test and be science driven. And that's what we do with everything. We're presenting the transparency of our data and the science, and let the data speak for itself, which it does. You can't stick your head in the sand and say that every generic and every drug product out there is perfect, because they're certainly not. They're not all the same. That concept is demonstrably false. But there's plenty of good product out there. A lot of companies doing a good job, and I think we just need to work that much harder to weed out what is bad, and to, as an industry as a whole, motivate quality. I mean, the way that the overall manufacturing system is built now is that once you get that FDA approval, it's essentially everything is the same. So you're motivated to create a product just good enough not to get recalled or fail or cause visible problems for a patient. And that doesn't always happen. And of course, something with like carcinogens, you wouldn't even know till obviously much later, or if we actually detect them. So incentivizing quality, I think, is important. The FDA has been thinking about this for decades. And I think we're of the mind of actually doing it. So, we're very science driven first, but it also means we don't back down just because there's huge companies and people always say it's a very litigious field and there's tons of lawsuits in all of these areas. We don't deal with that. We just say, look, here's the science, and there's important problems that need to be addressed.
Well, thank you all for sharing the stuff that you're doing, your companies are doing right here. As we're having this conversation, and I've already seen one question about it, and this was going to be one of our questions. For anyone listening, but also another group, we have lots of young students in New Haven who are looking up, seeing these companies grow right before their eyes. How do people get into the industry? There's two groups I think I'm labeling here. People who are already in the workforce who may be interested in being a part of this, but then also the child, the student who's looking up and is just hasn't even started their career yet and is looking for an opportunity. John, maybe I'll start with you on that.
Well, it really starts with, establishing interest and excitement about science and mathematics and as well, at the primary level and certainly in secondary school. I think there's been, over the last 20, 30 years, there's been a shift away from legitimate interest in science to other areas of study, which are valuable. But if you think back into the 60s, where everybody was all excited about the space program and what NASA was accomplishing, and later on a revolution in electronics and transistors, it really got a lot of students interested in science. I can remember participating in science fairs where I always had the volcano, which was exploding, but the better students were actually, building little transistor radios and those sorts of things. And there was a lot of interest, and we've seemed to have lost that. So we really need to, reestablish through public relations and sorts of education, maybe through social media or whatever we have now, to get kids back interested in science. And then, of course, that natural passion takes them into a particular field of study, their major in college, and then ultimately into medical school or graduate school in a particular area. but specifically within, in biotech, we're really driven by, biology, well, in my company, biology and chemistry. And so those are the areas to look at if you really want to make a move into biotech or into the pharmaceutical space. And there are great programs both at elite academic institutions like Yale, as well as the more local universities. I mean, we just hired somebody from a local university that had a background in analytical chemistry and brought him in as a technician, doing routine analysis and preparing samples for testing in animals and that sort of thing. So there's multiple entry points, but it all begins with a foundational education in science, in the physical sciences.
Graham?
Yeah, I would just build on what John is saying by talking about the importance of inspiration and what we see happening. I think with COVID presents potentially a moment for the industry. It wasn't long ago where many of the pharmaceutical industry and the tobacco companies were on the same plane in terms of public sentiment about it. And I think when you see the type of innovation that's coming out of the industry now, especially in the New Haven area, and the dramatic effects that it can have on not just life, the quality of life, it can inspire you to get into the industry. And this could be one of those moments with COVID. I'm so proud of the way the industry has responded. And there's been 5 vaccines developed in the last 25 years, pretty much. And we're talking about having multiple vaccines in less than a year. That is remarkable. And I think that type of innovation and seeing what science can do for society and the good that it can bring is an important motivator. Now, practically speaking, for New Haven, I think we're pretty fortunate, because when you look up and children look up and they see signs, whether it's RVENUS, Biohaven, Raleigh Bio, Valshar, and they ask, what is that? Right? It provokes inquiry, right? There's interest and the people around you are in the industry and are passionate about it. And we at Biohaven, for example, have had 50 interns over the past 2 years. And we see that as being, really important. And I think often what happens is people have a point of entry into a biopharmaceutical company, and then it's like the world opens up. They had no idea the range of opportunities that you can play within a particular company. Somebody with a science background, I've hired many, have decided to go into marketing. And I've had people in marketing, go back into the science part of the business, in finance, right? There's all different disciplines within these companies that give exposure to the engine of what it takes for a biopharmaceutical company. So I think practically those internships and companies like ours extending and others extending those internships so people can get an early look at what it really means to be part of the industry is very motivating. I know for me, once I started, I was hooked, and it was because of the impact I could see my organization having on society.
Well, to your first point, Graham, my 4-year-old this week said he wants to be a scientist. So he knows that it's part of the fight against COVID. So that was exciting. Now, last week he wanted to be a money dealer, which we think is a banker. So it changes regularly. But no, I agree. It's an exciting moment for science and for the industry. Dawn, we were just talking about jobs and careers, and I know you and I have talked about diversity in the industry as well, especially as it relates to getting into the New Haven schools.
Right. And I apologize for disappearing. My internet went down. Technology. So are you talking about K through 12 or just?
Yeah, K through 12. Other opportunities, though. I know you're working on a lot of different levels to bring diversity into the industry.
Yeah. So our board recently created a subcommittee for ED&I, And Erica Smith, another CEO in New Haven at RVENUS, is leading that charge. And so we are working on supporting our member companies, and we will be coming out with a pledge, a BioCT pledge on, what we want to do to try to support equality, diversity, inclusion. And one of the things that we're also working on is underserved communities, helping those kids, children get excited about science and have opportunities to see what a lab is all about. So as these incubators come about, they can come and get tours once COVID's gone. But that's one way that we're working on that. Another is professional development courses. So as you were just talking about, so someone can decide if they want to do some classes on project management or clinical trial work, and reskill themselves in different areas. And those courses are going to be made available at the beginning of the year. We're also working with Southern Connecticut State University and the BioPath program. And they are the university that has the first graduating class, I think this year, on students that are getting a biotech degree. And so they have firsthand experience. They've done internships. They've worked on the equipment. They can hit the ground running. And so I've been talking with them about expanding that throughout the state, and also, again, going to the underserved or people that have lost jobs due to COVID, reskilling them and giving them opportunities as well. So those are a couple of areas. Also, teacher development. So helping those teachers in these communities learn how to teach some of the science for these children as well. So those are just some areas.
I know you're working on a lot. David, I'll close this question out with you. And what do you see as some of the opportunities to bring new people into the positions that you have at Valshar?
So yeah, really echoing a lot of what was said in terms of this is a great time for the industry as a whole. This COVID, and I think that it's been a rising wave of, you have the expression, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, which really came from, the 50s, 60s, when that was the big deal. And it, by the way, it was very hard. The rocket science was extremely difficult because you didn't have supercomputers, or, what you have on your cell phone is a million times more powerful than what they had back then. But I think the rocket scientist equivalent of today is the geneticist, is the organic chemist, is the so I think this field is an exciting one where a lot of people are excited to get into, and I think that kind of speaks towards the branding, right? What we were talking about before, like the better we brand New Haven and Connecticut as a whole as a place to take advantage of that excitement, and it's not just New York and Boston in this general region, I think speaks to that. The other area in terms of getting, practically what could people do now, really loved the point on internships. So my personal experience with that was excellent. When I was in college, I did a variety of internships at all sorts of different industry and academic, and it really honed for myself what I wanted to do. And we do that at Valshar as much as we possibly can, opening up internships in areas of pharmacy, of laboratory, even on the marketing side. It's such a great avenue of getting somebody involved, and works so well for both sides. It's a vetting opportunity for the company to see if it's going to be a good fit talent. It's vetting, for the individual to see if they even like this area. And I think especially in the sciences, sciences can be so focused, and you really have to have the college background, right? So, this isn't something without any training. You can't just walk into a lab without knowing what to do. But with basic training, and speaking to the retooling skills and things like that, there is basic training that you can get that is widely applicable. You don't need to be a genetic protein scientist, with a very specific PhD focus in something to be applicable to the to the bioscience world. So a lot of folks that are out there that have some science background, a foundation of scientific knowledge, a foundation of knowing how to work in a lab, can apply to so many different areas. And, an internship is a great way to get involved in that. And I think even just, mentally knowing that you might have majored in chemistry, but you could be great at a molecular biology job or vice versa. And I've, always seen that flexibility, not just at Valshar, plenty of biotech companies in Connecticut and elsewhere, where somebody who's motivated has, is a smart, excited person to make an impact. As long as you have that science foundation, there's a lot of avenues. So making that more visible for people, internships, I think could really all help out to make that funnel more impactful.
It's exciting. Well, I want to thank all four of you, David, John, Dawn, and Graham. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Hopefully we gave more exposure. Everyone knows about the bioscience industry, but to just peel back the layers a little bit more, let people know what's happening here, right here in New Haven, in this region, and the real exciting opportunities for growth that are going to occur in the next several years. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good afternoon.
Pleasure being with you all.
All right, well, for everyone, the Big Connect continues on. We have dedicated networking time at 1 o'clock in the Zoom room. You can turn over there, and then we'll be back tomorrow to wrap things up. Our last day of the Big Connect presented by Comcast Business will be Thursday. We will get started at 8:30 in the morning, but our featured speaker, Ross Dotat, columnist with the New York Times, will be on at 9 a.m. He's going to give us his overview of what happened in the election and what to look forward to going forward. Ross also, I should mention, is a New Haven resident and a regular columnist with the New York Times. So we're extremely excited to have him join us. Again, you can tune over to the Zoom room. We'll put that link into the chat and you can move there. We will do some networking time. Great opportunity to just connect with people in a Zoom meeting format. Again, our Zoom networking rooms presented by Southern Connecticut Gas and UI and their energy efficiency programs. I want to again thank everyone for being a part of this today. Thank you for attending, and please visit the booth exhibitors. Thanks again to our great panelists. Have a great day, everyone.